In this episode we are addressing the cooling system. We're going to start by replacing the rather tiny Rover radiator with one from a Mark 7 Honda Civic. In order to do this we need to remove the original radiator, a job made particularly easy when your teammate Matt has already done it for you. Cheers Matt! To give me better access to the lower radiator mount, I decided to take the bumper off. I was going to have to do this anyway for another job later on, so now seemed as good a time to do it as any.
Well, I missed the glorious moment of actually getting the bumper off, but it didn't frighten me too much actually. A couple of missing screws, which does indicate that I think it's come off before at some point. But anyway, with it off, I can now access those mounts and drill them out. Now, Matt did try before, but even with a 90-degree adapter, he wasn't able to get in there. I'm hoping with the front bumper I might be able to angle it a bit. If not, at least I can now get in there with a die grinder and a ball tip on them and grind out the spot welds. I'm hoping I can salvage those mounts and just re-weld them on a bit further apart. As you can see though, the light is going, so I'm going to call it a day.
The following evening I got back onto the job of removing the lower radiator bracket. I started this by taking a wire wheel to the paint to reveal where the spot welds were. For the spot welds revealed, I got the automatic centre punch in there and centre punched the spot welds ready for the spot weld cutter. In case you're wondering, I was using the light on my battery drill to help illuminate where the brackets were. I then got the spot weld cutter in there to release the brackets. If you have never seen a spot weld cutter, they are basically a very small hole saw with a sprung loaded pin in the middle of them that helps centralise the bit. Centre punching your spot welds gives the pin something to sit in. With the light once again fading, I grabbed a chisel and started to hammer it between the brackets and the lower slam panel. I had to readjust a couple of the spot welds with the spot weld cutter, but eventually I managed to get them off.
Well, it's a new day and you'll probably notice that the Rover's in a slightly different position. There's been a bit of a shuffle around here at the Project Peddlers headquarters. Last time I was working on this, I was trying to fit the radiator. I did trial fit it after cutting the mounts out and found really I need to drop it down if I can by maybe about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. If I do that, then the top will neatly tuck underneath the top of this panel, which will then let me get the fans in and the pipework at the back. The only thing that's really stopping it going down is a plastic under tray piece that's still bolted onto the car. So if we remove that, we might have a chance of doing it. Additionally, the 2 pieces of metal that make up this lower radiator support are kind of spot welded together along the seam. So if we carefully trim it out in just a few places, that should also allow the radiator to go down and allow me to weld the mounts that are cut off at the bottom back onto the car, just in a different position to support this. So that being said, let's crawl underneath and get this plastic trim piece out.
You may find this hard to believe because even I do, but I managed to get that under tray off without breaking a single bolt or plastic clip.
Right, well, I've gone and got that under tray piece off and dropped the radiator back in and got it in its position. It does just drop down now. It's just catching here on the slam panel down there, and it is sitting on that seam, hard to see, that I was on about earlier. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the top mounts, because I've got my selection of tapped bolt holes that I can use, and it turns out that the Rover's rubber mounts on the top actually fit the Civic's radiator perfectly. Unfortunately, the same can't be said about the bottom, so I am going to have to try and find some rubber mounts for the radiator. Weirdly, the Rover mounts are actually bigger, but anyway. So yeah, I might have to take a trip to the breakers or scour eBay or something for some rubber isolators for that. Haven't unfortunately got time to do that today. So in the meantime, I am going to make these top mounts. And then once I've got them in position, that will kind of fix the location of it. I can then come back in here and just grind a little bit of clearance in this seam here, just so it's not quite touching the radiator. We want a little bit of a gap so it's not rubbing, but at the minute it's kind of nicely holding itself in place. So let's crack out the grinder and some cardboard and start making some templates for some upper brackets.
First step in making the upper radiator brackets was to trim the part that held the rubber isolator. This bit was a pressed piece of steel that I wouldn't have been easily able to replicate given the materials and tools I had access to, so it made sense to utilise those parts from the existing brackets. With the original upper radiator brackets trimmed, it was then time to crack out some cardboard and make some templates for the next part of the brackets. With the templates made, I traced round them onto some 2mm steel and then proceeded to cut them out. One day I will find a better way to hold things down on my bench while trying to cut them out of an angle grinder. the plate cut out, I then needed to drill some mounting holes into it. This would allow me to bolt it into some existing captive nuts that were in the slam panel. With the plate made, I bolted it onto the car to check it fitted, and so that I could mark where I needed to trim the original radiator bracket down in height. With all the parts trimmed and prepped for welding, it was then just a case of fitting them in place and tack welding them together. I only tack welded them as I planned to take the bracket off the car and remove the rubber isolator so it wouldn't melt from the heat of welding before I fully welded them on the bench.
Now, since I went and built the top mounts, I actually went to the scrapyard to get a few little bits and pieces for this car. One of them actually being the rubber mounts for the bottom of one of these radiators. While I was in the scrapyard, I took a look at that Honda Mark 7, which is what this radiator is from, and had a look at how they mounted it. And I made a bit of a discovery. Unfortunately, I went and made a mistake, so I need to correct that. Unfortunately, it means the top mounts I made no longer fit, so I'm going to have to sort them out first. Right, after flipping the radiator over and putting it the right way up, it doesn't actually fit as well as it did before. It's kind of annoying. So earlier I mentioned that there's like a seam where two panels are welded together at the bottom, and that's what the radiator is currently sitting on. I need this to drop down just fractionally so that I can get these studs to basically tuck a little bit underneath this front core support. So what I'm going to do is take this back out and then get an adjustable spanner and start bending that lip down a bit to get this hopefully to drop into its right position. I need it to drop down because I need it to come forward so I can get the fans in so they clear the manifold.
My weapon of choice to bend the lip down was an adjustable spanner. In the middle of the lower slam panel there was a bracket that was no longer required. It unfortunately stopped me from bending the seam down, so once again I had to crack out the spot weld drill to remove it.
Oh. I missed that. Yay, the bracket's out. And the reason it was so difficult is I missed the spot weld. Oops.
The modifications made to the lower radiator support in order to get it to fit, I cut the welds on the upper mount and then modified them so that they would now hold the radiator back in place.
Apologies for any wind noise, there's definitely a storm coming in, so I'm going to try and get as much done on this as I can before I think the heavens open. With the top radiator mounts built, the next job is to make the bottom ones. This is the metal mount off a Rover 400. You probably saw me drilling the spot welds out on this earlier. This is the rubber isolator from a Mark 7 Honda Civic, which is designed to fit that radiator. I think someone at Honda had access to the Rover drawing office. Anyway, what that means is that hopefully I can just modify this bracket and re-weld this back onto the car. And before anybody says, well, wasn't it a stupid idea to go taking them off, I will point out that the bottom of this radiator is set a lot lower, so it wouldn't have worked with these in a standard position. First thing I'm going to do is hammer this straight and then mark up where on the car it needs to go. So I've lined up the mount on the radiator when it was in position, and that basically bit there on that seam is kind of in the way. So I'm going to trim that out, and that should hopefully then lift up the mount. What I'm really hoping is that then I can just weld the flanges on that mount back into this surface here, and we'll tidy up this beforehand. I'm going to get one done, then I'm going to make sure I've got that in the right place, and with that done, then I'll mark the other side and repeat the whole process.
For the areas where the lower radiator brackets needed to be welded on prepped, I gave them all a coat of weld-through primer. Now some of you might think this is a bit unnecessary considering this is a budget race car, but I really don't want the lower radiator supports rusting out just because I couldn't be bothered to take 5 minutes and paint them. The lower radiator brackets also got the same treatment.
I'm going to let that and the paint on the car dry. I'm going to make a cup of tea, and then when we come back we can actually look at tack welding this onto the car. Well, I went and got the other mount welded in, and so that's the radiator now fully mounted into the car. I'm going to leave fitting the fans and doing the pipe work for a bit though, because the next job I actually want to do is going to involve taking this radiator back out.
Now, there is more than one way to cool an engine down. I'm sure those of you who own a classic Beetle are all nodding in agreement with me right now. This is an oil cooler, and it does exactly as the name says, it cools oil. We're going to fit this to the car to try and help the longevity of this engine. Rover K-Series are not exactly known for their cooling abilities. I think an oil cooler is a good idea because oil gets to places inside this engine which the normal coolant doesn't get to. The other advantage of fitting an oil cooler is it actually also increases our oil capacity. This was very kindly donated to the team by our teammate Matt, so it's my job now to fit this into the front of the car, somewhere down here.
The first thing to do in order to fit the oil cooler was to grind an annoying little tab off that was preventing the oil cooler from sitting on the lower bar of the core support. The mounting location of the oil cooler decided, I then made up some brackets to mount it. This started by measuring the existing mounting flanges of the oil cooler. With the bracket cut to length, I welded on a couple of M6 nuts. Now, if I'm honest, this probably wasn't totally necessary and wasn't the best use of my time, but captive nuts do make things easier to assemble. The brackets bolted to the oil cooler, I got them into position to mark the holes needed to bolt it to the car. You may notice this has been filmed in what looks like a new location. That's because I was drilling these holes during my lunch break, and at the time work was having a bit of a shuffle around this workshop. With one of the passenger side brackets finished, I got the nut welded to the other one and also made a set of plates with captive nuts that would bolt onto the other end of the oil cooler. With all the captive nuts welded in place, I got everything bolted together ready so I could install the oil cooler onto the car.
Right, well that's the oil cooler pretty much mounted. Now all I need to do is make a little tab that goes from this bolt hole to there, and one that goes from there to there, and that will be your oil cooler mounted.
The necessary tabs cut out, drilled, and with their respective captive nuts welded to them, I got them bolted in place on the car and tack welded them to their respective mounting plates on the oil cooler. I did this on the car to ensure that all 4 mounting points were lined up. The last 2 brackets tacked up, I removed them from the oil cooler so that I could fully weld everything on the bench. I'm going to end the episode here. Come back next time when we will finish the plumbing of the radiator and oil cooler and hopefully get some other jobs done. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please hit that like button and share. If you want to stay up to date with the build, then please click that subscribe button and remember to turn on the notifications. And finally, if you want to see more episodes in this build series, then please click the link that should be on screen now. Once again, thanks for watching.